Hey there Pokemon fans, Decadence here, and today I'm going to be showing my top 10 favorite Pokemon. I'm sure lots of Pokemon fans have found Pokemon that they really like, and I'm no different. This was very hard because I like a lot of them, but I was able to pick out the 10 I like the most. Remember, these are my personal favorites. They are not based on overall stats or competitive viability. Also, this list will not contain any legendaries or Pokemon from the 6th generation, as I plan on making a separate video for them. But before I begin, here are 5 honorable mentions that didn't quite make the list, though I still really like. 1. The Charmander lineup. It is true that you never forget your very first Pokemon, and like everyone else who played Pokemon Red when they were a kid, I chose Charmander as my first Pokemon. I will admit that the anime is what made me love it so much. You see, before I played any of the games, I watched the anime first. The classic episode, Charmander the Stray Pokemon, I thought Charmander was adorable, and I always enjoyed when it came on screen, so I was very inclined to pick it when I finally got my hands on Pokemon Red. I love this evolution lineup. I mean, it goes from a little salamander to a powerful dragon. Charmeleon looked very cool, and Charizard's design was awesome. I do like its Mega Evolutions, but to be honest, I prefer the Y version over the X. Next, Zoroark. I missed out on Pokemon Black and White, so I didn't get to use one when it first debuted. However, I did get to see it when they were hyping the 13th Pokemon movie, Masters Evolution, and I thought it looked cool. Last year, I decided to watch the movie here on YouTube, and it made me like it, as well as its pre-evolution Zoroark, even more. Its design makes me think of a fox meets werewolf, and being the huge werewolf fan I am, it instantly grabbed my attention. Eventually, I was able to catch one in Pokemon Y, and while its illusion ability totally took me by surprise, I really enjoyed the Pokemon just as I expected. Zoroark and Zora are the very few Pokemon I like from Gen 5, so with that said, these two get a spot on my list. Next, Smeargle. Me and Smeargle have something in common. We both love to draw. Well, technically Smeargle paints, but hey, it's still creating art. I've been drawing since I was 4, and it's something I still do today. I thought that a Pokemon that likes to paint was such an awesome concept. If Smeargle was real, I'd definitely like to draw with one. Next is Scizor. When it came to bug types, I didn't pay attention to any except Scyther, but when Scizor was introduced in Gen 2, man did I think it was one of the coolest Pokemon around. I also loved seeing it in the anime series. During my Pokemon Gold and Silver days, one of my good childhood friends had one who he named Blade, and it was his main primary Pokemon. It was pretty strong and very fun to battle. Scizor is definitely one of my all-time favorite bug types, and my last honorable mention is Luxray. I really enjoy Luxray's design very much, and I also adore its pre-evolutions, Shinx and Luxio. I never expected to see an Electric Lion, as I figured they would have went the Fire Lion route, which ironically they did, with 6th gen Pokemon, Leo and Peror. Anyway, I really like Luxray, and just had to give it a spot on my honorable mentions. And now, I present my top 10 favorite Pokemon. Number 10. Flygon was a very big part of my Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald days. I mean, look at those eyes, look at those wings. How can you not want to give this little guy a pet? Granted, Flygon may not be the most powerful Dragon-type Pokemon compared to the other ones, but I still had fun raising one. A fun fact was that in Pokemon Sapphire, I was able to catch a shiny Trapinch and train it into a shiny Flygon. It was a special moment for me because it was the first shiny Pokemon I ever caught in a Pokemon game at the time. Sadly, I lost my Pokemon Sapphire cartridge as well as my Blue Game Boy SP when I moved. Man, I really miss them. Needless to say, I do prefer Flygon's original color scheme, but it still was pretty neat to have caught a shiny Pokemon for the first time. Anyway, Flygon holds a special place in me, and that's why it gets a spot on my list. Coming in at number 9 is Haunter. Haunter is definitely one of my favorite Pokemon from the 1st gen. Don't get me wrong, I do like Gengar, and I've even came around to its Mega Evolution, but I've always preferred Haunter's look overall. Honestly, the anime is what made me love Haunter a lot more than I initially did when I first saw it in Pokemon Red. More specifically, Ash's Haunter. I thought it was awesome and full of personality. It seemed like a great Pokemon to have as a friend. Admittedly, I never had one on my team until I replayed Pokemon Emerald on an emulator, and Haunter is a lot of fun to train, even more in Pokemon Y. I enjoy its moveset. Again, I do like Gengar, and I'd have Haunter evolve when I felt the time was right, but I will always adore Haunter thanks to the one that Ash had in the anime. Number 8. When Pokemon Diamond and Pearl came out, I didn't have much of an opinion on Gliscor. You only came across it a handful of times in the game, so it was hard to get a grasp on it. However, in the anime during the Diamond and Pearl arc, Ash ends up catching a Gligar and it later evolves into a Gliscor, allowing me to get some more exposure to it. It was then that I found adoration for both Gligar and Gliscor. In the anime, right off the bat, no pun intended, I really loved Gliscor's design. I mean, it's a bat, and bats are one of my favorite animals. Yeah, we had the Zubat line, but for some reason, Gliscor instantly grabbed my attention. It's funny how a Pokemon you initially didn't care for can end up becoming one of your favorites, isn't it? Number 7. What can I say? Blaziken looks awesome. Considering it was the first to start the fire fighting combination, it naturally pulled me in with this fighter design. When I first got Pokemon Ruby, I had the dilemma of deciding which Pokemon to choose because I really liked them all. In the end, I went with Torchic, and while I did have some difficulty with the first gym leader Roxanne, things got a little simpler. Admittedly, I didn't like Combusken's design as much as Marshtomps or Grovile's, but I was determined to see what Torchic's final evolution would be. By the time I defeated the 4th gym leader, Flannery, Combusken evolved and holy crap was I blown away. I loved Blaziken's design. Don't get me wrong, Swampert and Sceptile looked great, but Blaziken was just wow. Needless to say, Blaziken was a very reliable Pokemon for sure. Its anime appearance is equally awesome. Its Mega Evolution introduced in Pokemon X and Y is pretty neat, but honestly, all the Mega Evolutions of the Hoenn starters were great. In the end, Blaziken is just more nostalgic for me, and to this day, it's probably my first favorite final evolution as far as starters go. Number 6. It may be considered creepy by some, but I personally find it misunderstood. I really like Banette's spooky voodoo doll aesthetic, and it appeals to me even more when I researched voodoo in 2012. I can understand why some would consider this Pokemon evil after reading its Pokedex entry. From the recent entry in Pokemon X, it reads, "A doll that became a Pokemon over its grudge from being junked. It seeks a child that disowned it." Some people think that it seeks the child to kill them, but I don't think that's necessarily the case. I like to believe that they seek the child in hopes to reunite with them. Honestly, it depends what context you prefer to go by, as Game Freak isn't clear with what its motives really are. I also feel Banette follows a "don't judge a book by its cover" motto. It may look frightening, but deep down it's probably not what it seems. As someone who is a part of the goth subculture, many people view goths as scary or evil, but the subculture isn't about those things at all, and is quite misunderstood. So in a way, I can relate to Banette. And I feel like Banette would make the perfect contest partner for me. I'd love to put on a hauntingly beautiful performance with it. Unfortunately, I'm not a big fan of its Mega Evolution to be honest. However, I will always adore Banette and it deserved a spot on my list. Number 5. Umbreon is a big favorite of mine, but there's a small story behind it. When I first played Pokemon Gold, I had no idea that Eevee got 2 new evolutions. My brother evolved his Eevee first and he got an Espeon. I thought it looked so cool and I wanted to have one as well. The thing I didn't know was that you had to train Eevee during the day of the game to get one. Since I screwed with my game's clock in the beginning of the game, it was mostly night whenever I played it. Needless to say, my little Eevee did not turn into a silver fox but instead a dark brooding one named Umbreon. I was very surprised and didn't know what to think of it at first, but after spending time with it, I really grew to love it, even more than Espeon. I appreciate its dark and mysterious design. It did take me some time to come up with a plausible moveset for him, but it was well worth the challenge. The anime portrayal is what bonded me completely. The one Gary had was amazing. Umbreon holds a special place in my heart because the experience of getting a Pokemon you weren't expecting only to end up loving it more than you thought was a rewarding feeling to have, so Umbreon deserves a spot on my top 10 list. Number 4. Dragonite is probably my most favorite dragon Pokemon. Don't get me wrong, I do like most of the dragon types like Salamence and Garchomp, but I can't help but love Dragonite. I won't lie, Dragonite is an adorable design. Whenever I see it, I want to give it a hug. I'll even say that its whole evolution lineup is awesome. But even though Dragonite looks harmless, it can be a beast at battling. During my Pokemon Gold days, I remember instantly liking Dragonite after battling the Pokemon champion Lance. During a family road trip to Las Vegas, I remember spending the whole time in Dragon's Den looking for a Dratini. Boy, did it take a long time until I finally found one. Training Dratini was kind of a challenge, but it was well worth it. Dragonite was a very reliable partner at the time and was a big help. I loved its appearance in the anime, especially in Pokemon the first movie. Dragonite would make an awesome delivery Pokemon for sure. Move over, Delibird, because you have some competition. So while there are stronger dragon types out there, I will always have a soft spot for Dragonite. Number 3. Kadabra is a special one for me, mainly because it dates back to my Pokemon Gold days. I remember catching an Abra on Route 34 before you enter Goldenrod City. I thought it looked cool, but as you know, the only move it knew was Teleport, so training it was rather difficult. However, it was my pleasant surprise to see that Abra was able to learn the elemental punches Fire Punch, Ice Punch, and Thunder Punch. Upon teaching it these moves, he was able to rack up experience points and evolve into Kadabra. With the added move of Psybeam later into Psychic, I soon discovered Kadabra was my most powerful Pokemon on my team. Kadabra was the first Pokemon I ever got to level 100. I still remember one of my good childhood friends always wanted to trade for him, to which I would decline. His anime appearances were a delight to see as well. And yes, I do love Alakazam, and had I been less of a procrastinator, I would have evolved my Kadabra. But anyway, whenever I see Kadabra, it makes me remember my childhood days playing Pokemon Gold with my friends and battling with my psychic buddy. Number 2. Funny enough, Arcanine was originally my first favorite Pokemon, until another one took its spot. Still, Arcanine is one of my all-time favorites today. As a child, I loved dogs. They were my favorite domesticated animals. Not saying I hate cats, I love them, but I always loved dogs a teensy bit more. So Arcanine's design naturally grabbed my attention. I mean, it's a giant dog. In Pokemon Gold, it was one of my best Pokemon after Kadabra. I noticed that in each Pokemon game, I would always have an Arcanine in my personal party. So Arcanine's influence never left me at all. Besides, in Pokemon War Wheel, I'd love to have an Arcanine for a friend. Play fetch, teach him tricks, snuggling in the winter, and riding on its back. Arcanine would be a lot of fun to have as a friend. Arcanine might not be my number 1 favorite, but I'll always love and treasure it all the same, as he can never be fully replaced. And now, number 1. Yeah, Lucario is a cliche choice, but I can't help loving this Pokemon. When it first debuted, I honestly didn't think much of it. Its design definitely took some time to get used to, but I eventually came around. It looks like a humanized jackal of some sort. But if I had to be honest, the pre-evolution is what got me to like Lucario, specifically the anime appearance in the episode Pokemon Ranger and the Kidnapped Riolu. Riolu was simply adorable, and upon watching that episode, I found adoration for Riolu and soon after Lucario. If Pokemon were real, I would definitely choose Riolu as my first Pokemon as opposed to an official starter. I'd keep him out of his Pokeball and let him ride on my head. I could just cuddle Riolu all day, but back on Lucario. In the game, it has such a versatile moveset which makes training very fun. There was never a dull moment. Its Mega Evolution is pretty neat as well, though I mostly stick with its normal form. I just can't comprehend how much I really like Lucario, but all I do know is that it's my number 1 favorite Pokemon today. And there you have it folks, my top 10 favorite Pokemon. Believe me, this was not easy in the slightest because I have so many favorites. What are your top 10 favorite Pokemon? Comment them down below. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more, feel free to hit subscribe as I have more videos on the way. Again, thanks for watching and take care.